afternoon, everybody. Hi, Declan Bogan, on behalf of Brian O'Kennedy and I, welcome to Scaling Up the Circular Economy. So over the next hour, you have the pleasure to, one, to listen to a little bit of theory and a little bit of the practical side of what needs to happen and can happen and what are some of the realities. And then you're going to actually get to hear from a really rich conversation between Owen Dillon, Alan Eyre, and Les O'Reilly, with facilitated by Brian O'Kennedy. Do you understand practically the world for some companies that are actually bringing circularity at scale to the world, and hopefully we get to understand some of those challenges, some of the opportunities, some of the ways of how do we actually switch and change our mindset to make this a reality. Without further ado, we'll kick into some of the practicalities. I'm Declan Bogan, Learning Director at SUSTUB, and along with Brian O'Kennedy, Managing Director of Clearstream Solutions. We live and breathe the world of ESG and sustainability and learning and strategy, and we bring that into our thinking as we educate and inform and implement in the world of the circular economy. So today you'll get to hear of the reality of what we see, what we do, and how we engage out in the marketplace. This is part of our 2023 webinar series, our first quarter at least. This is Scaling Up the Circular Economy. In February, we'll be looking at demystifying sustainability and ESG reporting. And then in March, about return on sustainability investment. These are three topics that we have really begun to realize there are big conversations happening at board level, at executive level, in senior management teams and across businesses that really realize, they know that sustainability and ESG, it needs to be a core driver of change in their organization. So hopefully by listening to a little bit of theory and then the practical realities of businesses that are living and breathing this, that will be able to inform your own businesses and how you might be able to think. Part of our process today, we'd ask you that if you do have questions, and there'll be questions for the panel, that you put them into the chat, and we'll have opportunity towards the back end of the conversation to go through some of those questions. What I said is we're going to listen to Alan, Owen, and Les, and I'll let Brian introduce those in a short while. So one, what is circularity at scale? And I think we've all begun to realize to truly make a change, to truly transform and transition to a low carbon economy, we really need to embrace the circular economy. And I know there might be some circular economy newbies in the house. And if you're only watching this online afterwards, if you've never heard of the circular economy, then we'll have a definition to share in a couple of minutes. When we stood back and we think about the economies that we're very familiar with, we're familiar with the linear economy. We take, we make, we use, and we lose. You know, it ends up going to landfill or into an incinerator, or it just doesn't get the value is lost. In the circle, so it's not recycling. It's so much more. We continuously utilize the same resources, ideally regenerative, it's possible. Time and time again, we recirculate them indefinitely to infinite product life cycles with zero waste or pollution using fully renewable energy sources. So one of the things I'd like you to take away from today, that we have a core definition: same resources, recirculation, indefinite, no waste, pollution, and renewable. So if you can keep those in your head when you're looking at your own products or services or businesses, and that will help you to think more circular. Two numbers I want you to remember from today as well: 100 and 93%. There's about 100 billion tons of materials extracted from the world every year. And a recent circularity gap report has indicated that 7.2% of those materials ever go back into the circular economy. Now, we could easily get, disheartened at, oh my God, it's only 7%, and it's going down. It was 8.1%, it was 9.6%. So we're going in the wrong direction. We could all get really saddened by that. But I like to flip it on its head. I like to think about the 93%. There's a 93% underutilized value in the materials that we take out of the ground, or we grow, or we extract. So there's 93% for opportunity for circularity at scale that businesses haven't and are not embracing. And hopefully over the next couple of minutes, we get to think, well, that's great and all, but what and how do we achieve that? So 93% is the opportunity. Don't think about the 7% at all, but that's all how good we are. We're actually sort of missing out on opportunity. If you want to find out any more, this came out only about a week and a half ago. If you really are interested in the circular economy, it's a must-read report. It comes out every year, and there's lots of insights and examples of how we can actually introduce and implement the circular economy. 3 brands you'll be very familiar with. What have they got to do with the circular economy? Volvo have committed to being a fully circular business by 2040. And that means fundamentally changing their processes, their products, their materials, their business models, the system they operate in. And yes, we can hold up that all car companies are trying to sell more cars. But fundamentally, if we change the mindset and becoming to being a circular business and set that as a North Star, then it should fundamentally shift and change everything. IKEA committed to be by 2030. BMW strategy is digital, electric, and circular. So these are now conversations happening up at the top table in organizations, and they're becoming embedded into strategies. This will ultimately filter down into supply chains. It'll filter down and become the norm. We have a challenge that the circular economy is still not fully known out there. Really, when we stand back from circularity at scale, we need to think about the system that we operate in. And a fancy Bugatti Veyron, probably not the most circular product in the world, but it gives you a sense of the richness that we have to play with. So when we think about the system, we need to break it down in time, before, during, and after, and in space, before, subsystem, system, and super system. So when we actually think about a car or a product, any product, you put a bottle of milk in the middle here, what's its components? What's it made up of? And is there circular opportunities in the materials level? Before it's ever car, it's in design. What's the circularity around design and car and design, car and used car at the end of life? What happens to the car after it's finished? We also then need to think about the transport system. How do we enable more circular movement, product as a service, access to cars at a city level, at a country level? There's opportunities to innovate in all of these boxes from the circular economy lens. How do we reimagine a circular transport system? How do we imagine the life cycle of a product, of a car? And how do we think differently about the materials? Well, what lobbying and governmental change do we need to implement at a super system level, at a country level, to enable us to use circular materials? Or even across transboundary, how do we move products around the world in a seamless manner so we can have circularity internationally, not just in a local environment? And there's great examples of the likes of Amsterdam becoming a fully circular city. Some of the realities of the circular economy. There's some great articles recently published by GreenBiz. If you're looking for inspiration in this space, GreenBiz have a great article on circularity at scale and some of the challenges and opportunities. But some of the key notes from that recent paper, it's not a new thing. Circularity has existed for eons. It's not, circular economy it's repair, it's refurbishment, it's remanufacturing, it's refilling. We had bottles of milk that we used to send back, refill, and reuse. That was the circular economy, using electrical milk trucks. So we can do this. That's a given, because we've done it in the past. We've just forgotten our way, I think. And there's opportunities to re-implement and redrive a lot of those models. And scale, then it becomes a mindset. It needs lots of actors and players to make that happen. There's an appreciation that we may cannibalize our own current business models. We've done it this way for so long, we might cannibalize and have financial challenges in that regard. So the financial compensation, how do our sales staff sell circularly, as opposed to and sell a service as opposed to a product? And I know the Owen and Alan and Les and Brian will explore that shortly. But the market is looking for us, whether they know it or not. And we need to be a driver of change. We can actually be change makers and drive that change. And it is about behavioral change as well. We need to communicate the benefits and overcome perceptions. There's a perception that remanufactured products may not be as good as virgin products, and we do need to influence that change. We've had the antiques industry hundreds of years, thousands of years. So there is a psyche there. There's an opportunity there to tap into deep-seated thinking and behaviors that we need to drive. Linear, circular. We mentioned that earlier on. We need to unlearn what we've done and how we speak and how we engage and change that supplier-customer relationship. And unlearning is a key part, and then relearning new models. Regulatory landscape. There's obviously a drive, at least in Europe, to drive a circular economy, and there are various geographies around the world that the regulation isn't as evolved, but it is enabling us to change our thinking, and it is a driver, and hopefully it'll hoover up the laggards. And as I mentioned earlier on, it's also still an unknown for many. And for those that aren't aware, we actually have a minister for the circular economy in Ireland, with Oisin Smith. So we need to be, it's at the top table. And so that circular economy piece is slowly filtering through. When we do our training course in SUSTUB, circular economy, sustainability 101 is number one. Climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, they're the top projects or the top areas of interest for our participants. Circular economy comes further down the scale, but really for us to be able to address our greenhouse gas emissions, we need to use the circular economy. So we're big advocates for the circular economy. It's also an opportunity for great innovation, creativity, and it's personally, it's where the greatest level of opportunity lies in changing things. But how do we do it? We've 10 key steps. One, we need to incentivize and support product design for circularity. It starts in design. 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions or climate impact starts in design. How we bloody hell put stuff together at the very start will ultimately decide what happens to it over its life cycle. We need to enable producers to increase sourcing of recycled content. So we need to be able to enable circular supplies throughout the value chain. We need to increase market demand. We need to drive consumption models to increase market demand for circular products and services. And that's us now driving it into retail, driving it into B2B and B2C opportunities. We need to support new business models. But be that in sharing platforms, product as a service, product life extension, resource recovery, circular supplies. These are the top 5 main business models in the circular economy. There are others, but these are the key 5. So we need to be able to enable these, whether it's in a go-car or whether it's in the types of materials through repair and refurbishment. We need to be able to encourage bring back. We need to be able to get consumers, like IKEA recently, with their becoming circular by 2030, you can now bring your products back, and they will reward you, and they will give you, if it's in good enough condition, you'll get quite a big incentive. If it's not so good, less incentive. And you can see even in Dublin, in IKEA in Dublin, there's an area where you can buy pre-loved and pre-used furniture. And we need to encourage consumers to bring it back, not just to throw it away. We need to set up efficient and effective collection systems. It's only at scale, circularity is only as good as the materials we get back. For that continuous use of materials, we need to be able to bring it back. We need to be able to have that efficient and effective ways of enabling us to bring our stuff back, whether it's at a business level or at an individual level. We need to enable efficiency and transparency in materials movement. There is challenges about moving materials cross-border and how it's categorized as waste, or is it a resource? So we need to be able to have the right regulatory conditions for compliant and responsible transfer of materials, and not just ship it off to some poor country around the world that doesn't know what to do with it. It does need that level of efficiency and compliance. We need to strategically plan and install sorting, pre-processing, and recycling operations. This is where we now start to think about capability. We have, and I have a great example, we have assembly plants for cars and trucks. And Renault in September announced that they have a disassembly plant. And to invest in the circular economy, we need to reimagine that product journey or that customer journey of what happens to the product after the fact. And can we disassemble, have a disassembly line? Like 180 degrees, flip the idea on its head from an assembly to disassembly. So we need to invest in capability. We need to incentivize investment. We need to increase incentives for investment in those recycling technologies. So it's great having plans. We actually need to enable companies to actually think about these things. And the last one, and it's significant in that this is a human element to it as well. And this is about having a circular workers. It's about creating new jobs and integrating and advancing decent work. This job should be just as important as any job. And it's not seen as a lower job that we're taking stuff apart as opposed to putting stuff together. All the while, managing for regulation, measuring what are we doing in the circular economy? Is what we're doing actually making a difference? And can we communicate that? And are we disclosing what we're doing in the circular economy? I'm conscious that at 15 minutes, I wanted to get through as much of the theory. And what Brian is going to work through now with the panel is going to discuss what does some of that feel like when you're actually at the coalface in a business, running projects and trying to build circular economy at scale. And hopefully if there's any questions, please put them in the chat. And looking forward to Brian and Owen, Alan, and Les's conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Declan.
Quick.
A great overview of the opportunities and the challenges in the circular economy. I'm conscious that when we were talking about the particular topic for the circular economy, many of you will consider the circular economy focused on issues of waste, or maybe where we return stuff, or certainly on a personal level. There's a lot of community activity in the circular economy. But really, the big challenge for us now is to take that, if you like, community, societal level and scale it up at an industrial, at a business level. So in that context, I was delighted to be able to welcome 3 panelists. So I'll maybe ask our panelists to turn on their videos, and I'll do a very quick introduction to all 3. I'm also conscious that we're a little gender imbalanced, so apologies for that. We will address that in our upcoming webinars, but we have and we're also a little imbalanced in terms of the sector. So a lot of consumer electronics technology, but we all touch these products. They're relevant to each of us in our daily and business lives. So I think you'll find this conversation extremely interesting, irrespective of whatever sector that you're in. So in alphabetical order, just a short introduction. We have Alan Eyre. Alan is the Sales and Marketing Director of Fanua Limited, and Fanua is a well-known brand in Ireland, largest mobile product distributor business in Ireland. Alan is a mobile industry veteran, and he's worked in the sector for over 30 years. As Sales and Marketing Director, Alan is playing a leading role in their circular economy services, and it's core to everything that Fanua does, including repair, trade-in, recycling, refurbishing, handset, and Fanua also has a platform for reselling mobile phones. And for those of you like myself, you'd have to own up. I think we were talking about this morning. I think I have about 8 mobile phones stuck in drawers at home, so need to do something about that. So Alan, great opportunity, very welcome. We're also joined by Owen Dillon. Owen is from Flextronics, or Flex as they're called. He's the Senior Director for Strategy and Solution Design at Flex. And he leads the product manufacturing, the leading product manufacturing and services company. Flex is one of the world's leading contract manufacturing providers, but also as a supply chain and circular advocate. Owen has been responsible for delivering sustainable supply chain solutions for Flex in the medical, computing, and consumer electronics products. And he's got a particular interest in closed loop systems, which we will come back to. It's very interesting. And the recycling of materials and the carbon footprinting through packaging and product design. So welcome, Owen. And last but by no means least, Les O'Reilly from HP. Les is head of managed services, and he's the country lead for HP Ireland. He's a HP veteran with over 20 years experience in solution selling, and he currently leads the managed print services function in Ireland. Managed services print is a circular supplies model. It's been there for years, just not presented particularly in terms of the circular supplies model. So HP offers printers, multifunction, secure devices, to answer all sorts of business needs. Les is HP's recognized sustainability champion in Ireland, and is obviously part of the HP DNA since it set up the business was founded over 80 years ago. Today, HP is recognized member of the Global 100 Most Sustainable Companies, and with huge interest and admiration from ourselves here in the CDP group, HP is one of the few companies in the world, and it's less than 100, who have achieved AAA ratings for its climate change, forestry, and water responses under the circular economy. So welcome, gentlemen, and we're going to spend the next 40 minutes or so discussing the opportunities and challenges and how companies are, your company in particular, is scaling up the circular economy. So I'm going to start again back to you, Alan, and maybe ask each of you in turn to outline essentially what does sustainability and the circular economy mean to your business, and how do you view it as potentially as a driver of value for your organization? So maybe Alan, we'll start with you on that, and we'll go around the table on that one.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, just to kind of add to the introduction you gave there, Cuno is probably not a huge brand in the Irish market because we're very much in the background as a distributor. We deal with a lot of large partners in that distribution world of moving hardware through supply chain and into all the channels, particularly for the likes of Vodafone, Tesco, Mobile. We have relationships with Air and around reverse services and repair services. And it's fair to give a shout out to our subsidiary business, PhoneFix, which may have a bit more of a consumer brand to it because we provide door-to-door repair services around nationwide. And they give us, I guess, that piece of that circular economy that we're talking about, and providing that 360-degree service to those kind of partners. So we've probably been involved in circular economy without knowing that it was called circular economy for so many years now, right? And only now we're starting to put that kind of badge on it and recognize it for what it is. Well, for us, it's been about driving value to our customers like Vodafone, seeing what they needed to provide in terms of services to their customers and providing those service solutions around those. And it's all around providing slick and dynamic systems to allow them to interact with their consumers in retail around repair and sustaining that longevity of that device, making it work at its optimal level as long as it possibly can, to then provide smart ways of allowing at the end of that cycle, when it naturally needs to come to the end of that cycle, allowing the consumer and people like Vodafone a way of bringing that device back in. And I think it was mentioned there by Declan, the biggest challenge, obviously, is getting that message across to bring that device back and do something with it. So we've worked heavily with our partners to at least give them the tools to allow them to provide those services out in the marketplace. The other side of that, with PhoneFix, it allows us the technical expertise, the training to look at those devices, properly assess them, do any kind of refurb requirements to them, and look at whether we can put them back on the market in some e-commerce way, right? And you mentioned there that that for us has started to take the form of a brand that we call Mint Plus, because we felt that we could stamp quality on a very confused marketplace, right? The consumer does not know what an as new device looks like. It doesn't know what to expect. It doesn't really know what price you should be paying for it, and what quality is going to get at the end of that. So we try to put a brand around it which would represent quality and represent what you would get for your money. And essentially, we built a brand around Mint Plus that equally could go back through those channels, or in some cases we are now providing that service direct to consumer. So we're very much still on the journey. We're very much still working with all our partners to get this right. I think we have all aspects of this collectively built. It's about building that into this circular piece and recognizing it. What it has done for us in the last couple of years, where obviously everybody's talking about sustainability and the environment, and all corporates are now driving that big objectives, it has opened up And it's fair to say, out of some necessity as well, because our industry is shrinking, that the mobile phone market is shrinking, volume. We were in a volume game, so it was important to us to keep moving volume, keep moving new devices, right? But in a very consolidated market now, what it has done is allowed us to change our business model or diversify our business model, where we're now moving and talking to a new set of customers directly. So there's probably three significant opportunities come from this circular economy for ourselves. Probably the biggest is we're now working with a number of large enterprise businesses headquartered here in Ireland, in Dublin, but servicing and all of their staff across Europe around delivering device lifecycle managed solution. So cradle to grave type solution where we manage their asset all the way through, take it off their hands, so to speak, allow them to have this zero touch type model where we're servicing direct to their staff members a new device with solutions around direct repair, again, extending that life cycle. So allowing an enterprise business to, instead of upgrade their staff members every 2 years, now push it to every 3 years, get the most out of that device. But equally then at the end again of that cycle, having a very prescriptive way of bringing that device back through the system, because a lot of those devices would get lost. You mentioned there you've got 6 devices, 8 devices in your hand. But I guarantee every single time a staff member gets an upgrade, a lot of the time that phone never comes back. He then moves company, gets a new company phone, and he ends up with 4 or 5 fairly new devices sitting in his drawer. So we're providing services to get those devices back, to bring some value back to the enterprise or corporate customer, actually giving them cash back for that device. But equally then giving them the knowledge that device is going to be handled with care, the data and the cleansing of that device is going to be done in an approved way, in an approved manner, and that device will then get a new lease of life through a renewal program. The second piece there is that renewal program. So as I've mentioned now that we have now, the first time, are starting to build a brand, to a consumer brand around Mint Plus, with a quality stamp, with some assurance around what you're getting when a consumer decides to pick up a pre-owned device, right? So we stand behind that device. We've got a website that you purchase direct from, but we've also got that brand out in a number of key retailers, including Harvey Norman, Vodafone, Air. So we're able to stand over the quality of that brand. And the third piece is bringing back down to the phone fix pieces. We've developed a lot of slick web services for phone fix, where they're interacting directly with the consumer to allow the consumer to log onto the site, book a collection, have a door-to-door collection repair back and forth in Dublin within 24 hours. And we've got a number of drop-in sites around the country as well, where you can drop in, book an appointment and get your repair action within an hour or 2 hours. But the key to that is it's in an approved environment. It's in an approved, authorized environment, which means that we are extending the life of that device. We know the quality of the parts that are going into that device, and rather than in some cases more harm than good being done to a device being repaired in an unauthorized way where you're not sure what quality parts are going in, we've gone the other way in making sure that, one, we're doing the convenience bit, but two, we can approve what we're doing, and we're extending the quality of those devices. So,
thanks, Alan. That's fascinating. As you were going through that, I was ticking off all of the boxes in Declan's circular pie chart that said this is what you need to do it. That's a superb case study. I'd love to come back to you on the incentives piece, but we'll move on anyway to next to talk to Owen from Flex. And I guess Owen, if I'm sure most people look around their house or their office or their business, there isn't a device there within sight that Flex hasn't manufactured. Most people probably won't be aware of all of the excellent work that you do also on the reverse side and the services and take back. So
yeah, no, that's great. No, and thanks for the intro, Brian. Yeah, I think, I mean, just for people, probably Flex is kind of the brand behind the brands in many cases. So just to kind of give it some context on the company. So it's a global company. We have about a revenue of about 30 billion. And really how we place ourselves in the market is we're an end-to-end product services company. So that will really include design and manufacturing, value-added fulfillment of products, and kind of the circular economy services as well. We're lucky, we work across 6 kind of key segments, which would be regulated areas like healthcare, within automotive, industrial products, and high volume areas like computing, cloud, and domestic appliances. My particular division really helps, it serves all of those particular segments, and we I suppose essentially get the product to the end customer, and from a circular perspective we take that product back, and we try and keep that product alive by doing repairs, by doing refurbishment, or even recycling services in some cases. So within our business, you know, we're in a unique position because a lot of our customers are the leaders in circular economy. A lot of the large tech companies, the likes of HP, Les, and we would work with companies like that, but they're pushing us to enable circular models at the moment. And they're generally leading the way, and they probably have the firepower in order to kind of really create those models at scale. And so that's where we're seeing a lot of demand. And in terms of, you know, what circular economy means to us is really, we want to help enable those business models, I suppose, really to keep up with those companies' commitments. We often see that a lot of these companies have made commitments about circular economy, about going carbon net zero way in advance. They don't necessarily always have a plan to do it, but it's a huge goal that they need to meet. And we really kind of work with them in all areas from the design phase all the way through to the end of life of a product, and really help them figure out how to get the best value out of it. But also, as we mentioned earlier with Declan, a lot of stuff is how do we design a product differently, and maybe how do we market or sell a product differently as well. And it's trying to get that value, making sure that you have the demand firstly from the customers, and then also being able to supply that demand is probably some of the key challenges we see there, and ensure that you've got a very high quality product as well associated with it. So that's really how we would be supporting the circular economy.
Excellent. And again, that whole area of design, I mean, you must be immensely frustrated at times when you see what's coming back and said, if we had our hands on this beforehand and were able to advise. So I you know, again, like to explore that. And also I know you've done some unique things around helping companies to measure the impact of the circular economy. So we might touch on that as well, Owen. And finally on to Les at HP. I'm a big fan. I'm instead of a user of your instant ink, which was described to me by one of your colleagues as the opium of the printer market, but I love the way it just arrives when I need it, and it arrives in a sustainable package and all that. And I know across everything that HP does as an organization. So what does sustainability mean to you, Les? What is the circular economy, and how are you driving value for HP and your customers?
Thanks, Brian, and thanks for that fantastic introduction. I obviously didn't write that myself, but actually just referencing that particular service you're referencing, that application or service as you refer to as the Instant Ink was actually a program that was developed and launched in Ireland. It's one of those programs, one of two, in particular around the circular and subscription services, was actually launched as a product, which I can refer to in a sec. I guess sustainability for me is just a way of working. It's a way of engaging with customers. I'm finding myself at the moment within my particular role supporting both medium-sized and large enterprise organizations who are at different stages of understanding what does sustainability mean to them as a strategy, as an outcome with their customers. And in particular with our strategy as a global organization, we've now launched, obviously this year, our 22nd sustainability report, which is a fascinating read. If anyone's interested in looking at that, it's the executive summary, gives you a high level synopsis of what it's all about to us as a global company. And the sustainability strategy for HP is very much built on 3 pillars. It's about the environment, it's about social values, and it's about climate. But specifically related to circular, and in line with the audience, what is circular? What does it provide as an opportunity? What does it mean for you within your own supply chain, and how it affects your business on a day-to-day basis? So HP is obviously driven towards a more of a circular economy and prioritizing products sustainable before, during, and after the life cycle of the product. So in the design phase, which has been referenced, you're talking about looking at recyclable post-consumer use of plastics and reutilization of plastics within both our print and personal assistance products. We were the first to launch what is a product in the personal system space of over 80% of the components were recycled. And even looking from a printer perspective, we've obviously got our world-renowned Irish launched program, Planet Partner program, which is about taking supplies out from customer environments free of charge, which are disposed of and collected and disposed of in an environment-friendly way. And only of this week, we launched a number there, which is over 1 billion supplies worldwide have been collected through that program, which was generated and created by an Irish guy more than 15 years ago. So it's another success story for ourselves locally. But yeah, everything from my point of view with regarding the design, it's about, we've got key targets, we've got aspirations, we're ahead of schedule in many of those strategic goals. You know, by 2030, we expect to have upwards of 75% of our products and components, including packaging, to be made of recycled material. So obviously that looks at the taking back of products from our customers, and also looking at a specific programs such as ocean-bound plastics, where we've actually leveraged those materials to generate and make our products. And I think if anything, what we've seen during the COVID period, as supply chains have struggled, I personally feel that we'll see more and more of an emphasis on that across all different brands, where the reutilization of products will become more apparent. And that in turn actually creates an opportunity for us, because everything as a service, where you buy as a subscription, and one of those consumer-based references you made, Brian, is obviously instant ink for those customers who want to avail of a service. If it arrives on time when you need it, and you only pay for what you use. That's also applicable to both our personal systems space as well as print, which has been a historical program that in the management service space. But yeah, so for me, it's an exciting time. We have a very strong report and rapport, and it's all based on standards. And as you mentioned, the CDP accreditation is something we're extremely proud of. We're proud to have that award, but also to retain it and maintain it. And so much so, we've been used as a use case with a number of both our global and local corporate customers of how you should become a sustainable supplier within a very difficult environment. So that's something I'm obviously personally involved with, and obviously looking at consultancy organizations like yourselves, where it brings that strategy together. We're obviously happy to partner with you too.
Excellent, Les. And I think, yeah, it's really interesting, because the focus that you've had on your climate strategy and your environment strategy, I suppose a lot of companies are maybe not conscious of the importance and impact that the products and materials have in that. And the reality is, for most hardware companies, if they don't transition to a circular model, they'll never hit their net zero targets, or certainly they're going to have a very significant rump of up to 50% of their product and materials of their emissions are going to be embedded in those products. So companies like HP that are ahead in terms of service models and taking stuff back and refurbing or replenishing or repairing or extending life or harvesting components, etc., have a more valuable solution for your customers, but you're also driving that climate change. So I'm sure that's why you're getting such high marks in your CDP scores. So well done. Okay, so that's a little bit of the positive stuff and the opportunities that are there, but it's a challenge. We often say the circular economy, Declan alluded to this, it's the most difficult thing for companies to do. It requires systemic change. It's not just, we can't just do it on our own. It has to be a systemic change up and down our value chains. So there's lots of blockages and challenges. So maybe as an organization, Alan, you might talk to us. You mentioned incentives. You mentioned about training and stuff. How are you actually educating the consumers and the customers, and how are you getting over some of those challenges that are there in the circular economy?
Is a challenge, and the challenge for Panu in this case is, because we're the service provider, we're sitting behind, a big brand retailer. It's very difficult for us to get that kind of influence. And I'll give you a kind of example here of when a big organization gets behind something, just what a difference it makes, right? So we've been running, I guess, a trade-in solution for Vodafone for probably 8 years at this stage, right? 8 years into retail, and the retail team will have a number of objectives and commission, and probably trading will be somewhere down the line on that. So it's very difficult to get those staff to be incentivized. But no doubt everybody will have seen recently the TV campaign that Vodafone doing about trading your handset, right? And it's fair to say, since that campaign has been running over the last couple of months, we've probably had more trade-ins back in that couple of months than we've had in the previous 8 years. So that's the difference there. When big organizations when they make that statement, when they push it out and they essentially talk to the consumer, into the hearts and the minds of the consumer and educate the consumer, that's what changes things, right? Because it's all led down. And we've put a number of our own incentives in place for retail teams, and it just doesn't happen unless the corporation behind it gets behind it. And that's the biggest challenge. And we need that to bring the consumer along, because 18 months ago, 2 years ago, we put in a range of biodegradable, compostable, eco accessories, cases. We thought we were ahead of the curve. This was going to be great, you know, and they didn't sell. They didn't sell because there was no message in store and there was no commitment in store to get it behind. So you created a problem for yourself, because circular economy became taking out those cases and doing something with them because they weren't going in. So the consumer wasn't quite ready for that, right? So it's very much for us, I'm not saying that all the time, but our challenge has been a service provider. There's only so much influence that we can have. We can bring the tools and we can provide the expertise of offering those back-end services, but it really is up to the retailer or the corporation to get behind us.
Okay. So hearts and minds, training, education, messaging, really key. And I remember a senior supply chain, I need to be careful just in case he's on the webinar. Senior supply chain executive in a large OEM told me once that returns are bad. We don't want returns. That you know, it's not something that we like as a business. You're making money on returns. You're driving value in that. So maybe talk to us about the impediments and the challenges that you see and how you're overcoming them.
Yeah, I mean, we love returns, but yeah, I think again, we mentioned earlier kind of things of the pandemic and kind of shortages of supplies over the last period of time. There's kind of been a shift in the marketplace. We saw a lot of e-commerce sales over the last little while, but with e-commerce, there's a huge amount of returns associated with it. And there's been shortages of products on the market, maybe due to component issues and things like that. So I suppose we saw two things: more returns coming back, but also more demand for products as well. And people were happy to maybe compromise and look for refurbished products. But I think when we, you know, you can get down into the very basics, as you mentioned, Brian, earlier on, is that in some cases products are actually difficult to refurbish. That can be just the way they're made. They're not made to be disassembled, and that can be a challenge in itself. And also, you know, other challenges are, you know, the cost associated with bringing a product back as well can be big. So there's a whole model associated with that, and also it's a mind shift change within an organization. So most organizations are used to selling new products. They've got quality managers, they've got product managers who are very much used to this. The product has to be absolutely perfect. It has to be in the best possible condition, and you know, that's what the customer wants. And really, it's that kind of mindset change to say, well, actually, you know, customers, once they have a functional product, in some cases, you got to segment your customers. So some customers will want the absolute brand new thing. Other customers say, look, I just want a functional product. And that's a big change. And that's a constant kind of battle we would always be having, because we'll have a level of returns. Some of those returns we can't use because maybe it doesn't meet a particular cosmetic requirement and things like that. So they're the sorts of challenges. And I think it's going to change over time, but definitely they're real, and it is those kind of those mind shift changes, and also educating the customers that, you know, maybe something slightly different, but if it's functional and it has a warranty, is perfectly good, are you happy to pay less of a price for that? So they're the sorts of things that are going on the market.
Excellent. And in that context of the changing behaviors, Les, we hear a lot about buyers and suppliers having, you know, linear relationships that they find it hard to change. I mean, if buyers and suppliers don't change the way they engage and move to service models and start talking about take backs and warranties, then we won't drive a circular economy, and we can't scale a circular economy. So how has HB, who is so successful, and your own business is about managed services, you're selling a product essentially as a service. How do you train your people to talk about the value and to engage with the clients and explain the benefits of the circular economy?
Yeah, actually, just back to the previous point by Owen there, I'd actually say that the opportunity there, we've got some statistics there that suggest that up between 13 to 15% of post-consumer recycled components are actually only being used for the manufacturing of new products. So that gives size up the opportunity for a variety of different businesses. But specifically to your point, Brian, so HP is obviously heavily weighted towards a channel program, a channel route to market for our products through resellers and distributors. So within our channel programs, namely Amplify, we have specific accreditation and training programs for our partners. So to train their salespeople who can turn then inform their customers in line with the specific training that we deliver to them, and they have to be certified in that place. So for us, it's definitely about getting the word out. It comes back to the point Alan was talking about. It's at scale, it's getting the message out, it's consistent, it's ratified, and it obviously has to deliver against customers' own procurement goals. And we're definitely seeing a change in procurement. Like obviously, I deal with some of the for British public sector, for example, like social values is a topic that's becoming more defined within their tender processes, and it's something hopefully we'll see as part of the OGP within the Irish Republic of Ireland public sector. Because I think if you do a search on sustainability in a tender, you may find the word 3 times, and the markings associated with that are very, very low. So you're going to focus your efforts on where the higher points are. So there's a massive opportunity, but there's a lot of work to be done. But no doubt about it, education is key. And we do believe we've got this subscription service as a consumer, SMB space, and then with our channel partners to deliver against those device as a service type models, which are mature within our portfolio, delivered through our partners and directly.
Okay, very, very interesting. And you touched on something there around the tenders and the legal requirements and expectations that I'd like to touch on briefly in the last few minutes. Is the role of legislation and maybe some of those other drivers, because there are some barriers here. Declan mentioned the issue of transborder shipments of waste and things like that. And we've always felt, you know, a lot of people say, particularly in the construction sector, that, you know, circular economy is mentioned as a key issue, but all the rules are set up to avoid that, insurance issues, etc. So lots of challenges in that. But some of the things that we're seeing in that space to drive the circular economy are things like product ratings. So where the EU, I think it's law in France now, but the EU is mandating the measuring of the circularity of products. So how reusable is it? How upgradable is it? How repairable is it? Alan, are there any things in terms of legislation that would help, or any things that you see, that levers that might help us to move that circular economy in the legislative or regulatory space?
Well, for me, just talk about our particular business at a local level. What we really love to see is, you know, there's some kind of standardization about what recycled, what compostable means to the business, because we see a lot of people just put a green stamp on a product and put it out back into on a shelf. But what does that mean to the consumer? How recyclable is that? And it just seems to be a very grey area. So we've done a lot of research in terms of trying to find accessories that support our business that are fully compostable in both earth or ocean. But it's so easy at the moment just to put a green stamp on something, put it on the shelf, and the consumer is completely confused by how green that really is. That's something that would be good to start seeing coming through, some kind of standardization. If you put a green stamp on something, how green, and what does that level of measure green mean to a consumer, so that there's some kind of... The other thing that sort of goes around our business, around a conversation around pre-owned device and trading in devices, and it's confusing even to us at being is this conversation about marginal VAT, and how businesses are able to set themselves up to be able to take a trade in, you know, and use this marginal VAT scheme to allow it to be more price competitive as it goes through that sort of e-commerce cycle, which it still seems to be very confusing and very difficult to get set up as well. So those are the two key things that we see as challenges in our business.
It'll be interesting when we start to see potentially prices being put on carbon, whether the idea of being able to reuse will actually lower the price of carbon and might prove to be an incentive. And I know, Owen, that's something that Flex has been involved in terms of measuring some of the impacts of the circular economy. I think Les mentioned the fact that you've set all these carbon targets, and there's a lot of focus on measurement and the impact. Do you want to maybe touch on what you're doing, what sort of value you're driving by providing data and insights to your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose, again, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of customers are making those kind of big statements associated with net carbon zero and things like that. And really, when I suppose we want to make sure that, you know, it's still a developing area and it's still a growing area, but we want to make sure that we're having the most impact with the clients. So really, the first thing that we do is we look at on a product level. We look at it from a life cycle assessment perspective on a product. You know, what is the product doing? What is it made of? What's the carbon impact associated with it? What things can make the biggest, you know, what areas should the company focus on to make the biggest impact? So in some cases, it might be how much power it uses. If you change that, that might have actually a very big impact in the short term. In other cases, it might be, well, your materials in here, if it could be changed to maybe recycled material, that will make a very large impact. And also, if you're looking at maybe doing refurbishment of it, by extending the life of that product, it can have a very large impact. So really, by understanding that more closely, it really helps, and it drives a conversation. And because in some cases, it might change differently how you look at a product in terms of refurbishment. So it'll make a bigger impact. But maybe the value proposition mightn't be quite as good on that particular product, but the actual impact from a sustainability perspective can be larger. And there are really good conversations to have with the customer and understand how to focus.
Perfect. And I'm sure there's feedback into the design process then to help the designers understand the impact of some of the decisions they're making. If you can say that that's going to impact this in terms of emissions related to our products and therefore our targets. So I think you're definitely onto something key there. And Les, from a HB perspective, I mean, are there any of those barriers that you're working with public sector, you're working with private sector? What are the things that if you could change, you'd say, you know, this would really help us to drive more circular economy? And is there anything that you think collectively businesses need to do to drive this further?
Yeah, I think, Brian, you and I have spoken about this in a one-to-one situation. I think definitely buying product as a service will definitely, there'll be an explosion of those type of services going forward in order to achieve some of those targets around that circular piece. So the reuse of a product, so you're buying a service that's a fixed fee per month, regardless of what it might be. And in turn, there's a circularization aspect to that. I guess organizations need to start to work out how they work out their compensation plans. People are paid in hardware versus services. There's those type of attributes as well. And that's just looking at myself or others. But definitely as a service, I think would be a key area of growth for a lot of organizations to allow them to bring back in legacy products, to reutilize those products or quantify what products and components they can reuse in the life cycle of a product. And I'm sure that applies to Alan's business as well. And it's not anything new per se, but it's education, having the right programs that make financial sense for organizations as well as for customers.
Yeah. And as you said, this theme of this is not new. It sounds like there's a lot of information and communication and understanding that needs to happen to unlock some of these changes, which may not be that dramatic. So I'm feeling a bit more hopeful after this conversation, that the challenges and barriers may not be as immense as we thought. Declan, there's a few questions coming in. I saw there just the last couple of minutes. Maybe we'll take a few questions.
I'm going to call them out.
Yeah, why not?
This is a very specific one for Owen. Owen, do you charge for returns? Is it a profit center for you while reducing waste for your customer?
Generally, if we're doing any processing on a product, you know, we provide it as a service, and generally there will be a charge for the returns. Now, then it's a question of whether our customer charges for that is a different story. So that will be the thing on it. So, but maybe for Les, it might be a better question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, I would actually say we bring security into that as well. You know, when you think about products which have media, which storage, which is data, so GDPR comes into question. So the recycling of a product is not just about the disposal of that product, it's actually the management of the data that may reside on that. We've had some scary stories out there, not directly from ourselves, but in the market where, you know, certain content, patient records could be left on a multifunction device, or that's being looked at to be recycled. So yeah, you know, it's definitely it's security and sustainability and circular, they go in hand. So we've got to be mindful of what you're sharing back. And again, with Alan, like with handheld devices too, although most content is probably leveraged into the cloud, but realistically, you've got to be conscious of security when you're thinking about circulars too.
When we didn't discuss the right to repair, let's say movement or direction now, but that's the other side of that coin. It sounds like a great concept, and I know HP provide all of the information and guidance on how to repair. But yes, I mean, I know personally I would prefer to have my product repaired through you know, official and proper expert channels. So I think that's part of the infrastructure of building up that Declan mentioned around building up the capabilities and the infrastructure for take back. But it does seem to be directionally where we're going to have that capability. I don't know if Alan, have you a comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's again about that approved process, right? It's been about authorised and trained to do a repair that's quite a sophisticated repair of a mobile phone. The challenge is, again, and it comes back to getting support from OEMs who make parts very expensive to provide that kind of authorised service, right? So that drives a consumer down the road to get some cheap repair done that doesn't necessarily do what it should do, which is to enhance the performance or keep the performance or the shelf life of that phone going, right? And that's the biggest challenge, because you go to an authorised repair centre, it's potentially going to cost you a lot of money to get your screen replaced versus going around the corner and getting it replaced in a third party type. So that's continues to be the challenge. It becomes a challenge for us because we are seen as being expensive to provide a service that is an approved service.
Right? Yeah. I think, as I said, if over time, as we recognize that the value and benefits, then hopefully those cost issues will come down because the provision will be.
The other side of that is that you're trying to get the message to the consumer that hopefully at some point now you realise you're going to trade that phone in and get some residual value for it. And the more you've cared for it in the proper way during that process, the more value you're going to get at the end of that process. Right?
Yeah. Well, I think people have been managing that in terms of their cars for many years. So yeah, why would you treat your phone any differently? Any other questions, Declan?
A quick one for everybody. Government has a role in funding the build out of CE infrastructure and also in regulating waste in manufacturing. Which is more important in the short term, regulations or funding? What should the government do about this? Stick or a carrot?
If anything.
If anything.
Anything. Right, regulation or incentive. So providing incentive. I think the deposit return scheme is a good example of a little bit of both
change.
Yeah. So what would you think, Les? Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I guess if we look at our supplies return program, which is the Planet Partner program, and people can subscribe to that for a home product or a commercial product, where we'll actually take back that product and fully recycle it. But that's a private business that we have, and it's a free service to our customers. But yeah, I'd love to see the option to have that facilitated with local councils, for example, and we'd have a specific collection, and to scale that out. Obviously, recycling centres across local councils are great services, but to scale those out within the WE initiative, as well as recycling programs and take backs as part of the circularization piece. So I think that's definitely an area of investment, I would suspect, within local governments and central government through Department of Environment, maybe.
Okay, and as much as it is a challenge for businesses because of the fact that we're siloed from design to end of life, governments are also in that scenario. So I'm sure they're struggling with the idea of changing systems, which always have loops and various issues. So thank you very much to the panel. I'm going to hand back to Declan just by way of wrap up. But thank you, Les, Owen, and Alan, and yeah, look forward to hearing about your new circular services going forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. And just to again to reiterate, Brian, thanks. Our next webinar will be on the 24th of February, looking at reporting, sustainability and ESG reporting, understanding CDP and GRI, and how do we actually disclose and communicate out the value that we're creating. So we're doing great stuff in the circular economy. How do we tell the world about it? And so what do we need to tell them in a structured format that ultimately drives change, and with our investors, with our banks, with our employees, with our suppliers, customers. So how do we actually communicate that value? And then, as I said, doing all this great work, you know, what's the business case? How do we actually inform our bean counters and our CFOs and our financial directors, and to show that all of this effort in sustainability, we're getting the ROI in it. It's what we're being asked. We're going to do all this work. How do we sort of show the value? So thank you very much. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. And thanks again to Les, Alan, Owen, and Brian, and for everybody that, and hopefully you'll all have a nice lunch and everybody can get out a little bit of sunshine this afternoon. Thank you very much. Be good, everybody. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.